Howdy, all you delicious people! I'm here today to review Bill before I kill him, because this is Kill Bill Volume This Number. We go on into this story here, and I have gone on and seen so many bits and pieces of this movie that I felt that I've probably seen this film. But now I'm to finally go on and actually fully sit down and watch it, and realize how interesting it is and how clickbaiting I can be into checking out the other movies, but also within this one singular film, realize how very incomplete it is. And to be very frustrated by the fact of how incomplete it was. And so we make our way into frequent flyer mileage to explain who people are, but not exactly incomplete of why they are there. Also, this movie is to quite possibly remind me of like slasher movies and just kind of like a mixture of just a number of things. It's so fascinating when you really think about it and break it down. Like, it feels like a superhero movie, also. It feels like an animated story because of how just stacked the odds are eventually the further and further we get into this film. And how maybe not everybody can believe that this woman is going to onslaughtingly take on this huge, enormous challenge, not because of her gender, but just because of just the outnumbering of which that eventually comes to specifically by the third act. But we're just in awe of how it all plays out, and we're just like, heck yeah! Just give me some of that swordplay a little bit more. So, we come to find a bride that is to make an event of a wedding, with the outcome of 9 slaughtered people and to have 1 gone missing. And the bride here is to have figured out who those people were to have killed those 9 and gone to track them down, deliver their life story, and then kill them. We first off have the bride meet up with Vernita Green, who is to be, within 4 years of passing, now had a family and changed her name to have it last be Belle, and is to, by the time that the bride meets Green, is to try to convince her that she has a family now and she's different from her past self. But the bride is to go on and convince Green here that, hey, I'm just coming after you. If you want to be even with it all, I could wipe out your entire family and not have a second thought, but I'm just coming after you. And then after that, we also have to showcase how the bride lived at certain points of like right after the wedding and her getting that metal plate and her getting out of the hospital and further needing to go on to meet up with Green and then further needing to go on and meet up with Orend here and finding out that she is to be like the leader of this whole clan of things and realizing how much of a bigger scale that the bride will need to, at first we are to think, go through all these certain gang members, which we're thinking like, oh, okay, like she should be able to easily dismantle these people. But then we'll go on to find out that there is to be an even bigger onslaught of what is to eventually all be called the Crazy 88. And we're to then realize, wow, I don't think the bride has really any chance of making out of this. Yeah, she's going to be sliced up to the heavens, but is she going to be alive by the end of this? Even though we realize that there are 2 other movies past this point, so we have to realize that she, like, it kind of ruins it by realizing that this is volume 1. Plus, also, like, within this movie, we never really get to physically see Bill, but eventually it's all to be the leading up of the reveal of who he is, even though we, of course, have IMDb's, we can Google it and see who he is. And so the mystique of this kind of ruins it, but still. Anyways. So, this movie was a very good revenge story that I did really enjoy, but felt that it was severely so incomplete that I feel clickbaited into other movies. And I hope that this video does go well, so that way I can justify watching those other movies. Or otherwise, like, I feel that this is all or nothing, because if this doesn't go well, then I can't probably justify eventually watching the other films. Because feasibly, I would not have probably remembered a good chunk of some certain something that happened in this movie that would need to be for other films. So, with that said, I did really go on and actually did enjoy this movie. I would go on and give it I'll say it's a solid good movie, even though it's very incomplete, it's very choppy, it's to in a very roundabout way tell a story, and also give us some very visually interesting characters, some visually interesting just big fight feels, and go on to say that, yeah, like, this is still worth checking out. This is worthwhile to see it all play out, even though, again, how severely incomplete it is, because this is the most incomplete movie I think I've ever seen. There is also to be a good chunk of this movie that is to not only be an animated short within it, and as well as also this movie is to be at some certain points not even in English, because subtitles at certain points. But other than that, like, I would recommend people still seeing it if they haven't in a while, because more likely a lot of people probably have. Let me know your impressions upon this Kill Bill movie. If you liked it, if you hated it, everything in between. Because I think it's about that time to just push into full-on spoilers about it, and where it is to, of course, be available for you to check out, for you to go on and be able to do so. I think this movie is to be available on Pluto TV. I say that as if it's a question. But I will also go on and give you a couple apps that you dare, in fact, will probably be able to not only watch Volume 1, but then all the other volumes conveniently within a mobile device and a Google Play Store available. And I'll go on and I'll rattle off these apps. Firstly, besides Pluto TV, I will say Clede Plus. KLEDE Plus should hopefully be an app that's available on the Google Play Store. You'll be able to download and be able to watch this movie as well as others for absolutely free. There'll also be an app that I think you need to probably Google search, as well as the following app that I'm going to mention. An app called Moopzzi, Moopzzi. This will be a app where the logo will have a green M on it. You may need to download an APK of it, other than it may be being available on the Google Play Store. But otherwise, I think that it's a good investment app for you to be able to see a lot of film, a lot of content for absolutely free. There is also to be a app called Zelifonic, Zelivonic. More than likely, you may go onto this app and may redirect you to the first app that I mentioned, but either way, you probably could go on to maybe either or of these apps, be able to search them through Google Play Store or Google and find them and be able to download them and be able to watch this movie for absolutely free, as well as all the other ones if they're not all consistently on one app together. So, with that said, yeah, I think it's just that time to push into fully breaking down this film because, yeah, like beyond just me kind of briefly describing this movie, there's not much else real like in-depth breakdown that I can really go into besides just going in and spoiling this movie. Uh, like I apologize. Like I think for this specifically, it's a little bit harder to exactly come up with the right way of breaking this all down. But again, this movie is worth it if you haven't seen it in a very long time, or if you're seeing it for the very first. Because there's a lot of people that go on it and just randomly realize that they've never seen something and check it out. So, with that said, uh, let me know in the comments below what you felt about Kill Bill, any of the films, or what is to be your favorite martial arts movie, a live action movie that has a lot of anime flavor in it, or also just strong female characters, or just action movies that are just stand out to you. At some point, as far as like future reviews will go on and be existing fairly soon, I'm gonna try to get more into almost like the superhero kind of things, or also to go on and just kind of do some interesting pieces. Beyond, of course, going consistently back into Power Rangers, which I've been doing that a lot lately, or a lot more lately. I feel like I'm gonna go on and soon review Beastmaster, that original movie, and then I will probably go on and also probably I'm tempted to review The Phantom, even though I'm sure a lot of people are like, man, I've never heard of these pieces, or like, man, you're really dipping into some really forgotten films. Yeah, I'm trying to do some pieces that are very much more interesting to lend upon instead of probably stuff that no one has ever heard of. Like, at least I'm trying to just do stuff that are just kind of so creatively different than anything that I'm doing on this channel, and that can just be very refreshing for me, regardless of what ends up being the outcome of how well those do. Plus, also, I'm just trying to find uh, just something to just be uh, interested in, and just to keep the ball going. So, for my mind, and just trying to be as creative as I best can. So, with that said, it's about that time to just push into the normal song and dance of spoiler time, spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. Let me know in the comments below anything that you want to go on and chat about, because without a doubt, it does help out this channel. It does help out me, knowing that people exist out there. Like, if you're a goat from outer space, I don't know what to tell you, but either way, I think it's about that time to say that I will bust out my cast list, or whatever insists to help me break down this film, because I think it's about that time to get more into detail with the whole spoiler of things. Thank you for going on and watching this, because I know you may go on and you may transition out, or you may have transitioned out seconds after you clicked into this because you weren't to go on and get what you were going to get out of this. But regardless, I do thank you for going on and taking that time, because I really do appreciate it. Regardless, I think it's about that time. Let's pause here and let me get out whatever I need to get out. Alright, spoilers. So the beginning of this starts off in black and white, because we kind of bounce around that a little bit, here and there. We start at the wedding, as the bride is to seemingly have her face beaten and bloodied, to be the only survivor of this wedding. Bill hovering over, going on and explaining to her and opening this movie with a question of, do you find me sadistic? Regardless of what she feels, and regardless of him wanting to probably just bake an egg on top of her head, Bill is to want the bride to realize that his actions were never meant to be sadistic towards the bride. it was to be towards other people. And as Bill was to pull out his gun and pull back the trigger, we have the bride that goes on to explain to Bill, as she has a bun in the oven, she has a womb, and hoping that there may be a thing to say to Bill to stop from him killing her. Bride goes on to explain to Bill that the baby I'm carrying is yours. And a gun goes off. We then transition to color. The city of Pasadena, California. And the bride is to make her way to the Bell house, giving a good old knock on the door, to have that door open, and a fight occurs. Because that fight is between both Bride and a woman who used to go by the name Vernita Green. She goes by Belle now, but soon that won't really matter what her name is, because she'll be dead either way. Bride goes on and faces off against Green within this living room, as back and forth there seems to be some chucking going around. We'll come to find that Green grabs Bride and chucks her into this wall, which eventually lands onto these record players and has a number of glass break here. As Green goes on to make her way to Bride, Bride goes on and kicks Green in the face, and she goes flying. Eventually, Bride is to land Green upon this coffee table, and they are to continue to fight within this living room, having Bride choke Green. Eventually, having the Bride chuck Green against this shelf full of these plates, and Green is to then take these shelf of plates and then throw them on top of the Bride and have this fight go on to continue into the kitchen, where we have Bride who is to grab this pot while Green is to have this kitchen knife. The two of them fight it out here, which eventually bleeds into the dining room. We'll eventually go on to have the Bride who is to kind of fall off the dining room table onto the ground underneath the table. Eventually, Green will go on to end up being on to top of said table. And here's where we go on to find out that the Bride has a knife as of her own, as we see that the knife goes through the table, as Green is to have her knife and is to try to figure out ways to get to the Bride. And so we come to find that the Bride just takes the table that Green is on top of and just kicks it, so that way the table swings this way and Green falls over. They continue to make their way back to the living room and knife fight face off. This ends up getting put on pause as we start to realize that there is a school bus that is to be pausing in front of this home, and a girl named Nikki is to make her way out of it. Nikki is to be the daughter of Green, and so since in some ways Green is to be a mother, and Bride is to have almost have been a mother, both of them realize that they can't go on and exactly be fighting in front of this child. It just does not feel right. So they whip their knives behind one another, And when Nikki opens the door, Green explains away what had happened to the coffee table, that a dog had just come in and broken it, and that Green is to explain away who the bride is, and it's just some old friend. And also Green is to explain to Nikki how she needs to go to her room and wait for Green to have her come back down when it's the right time. Nikki eventually pauses, but she'll go on and she'll do so. And so this completely stops the momentum of both Bride and Green fighting. Green turns to Bride and asks her if she wants some coffee. And once they go into the kitchen and they start talking, it seems further and further as they talk that this fight is not what it seems to have had us think, that this fight is going to happen right here and now, and they're going to have it out and they're going to finish it. No, it seems that this fight is probably going to happen later on, is what we assume. So this takes us some bit of dialogue time for also Bride to explain who Green is now, and that she's become a homemaker, and she has a husband named Lawrence Bell, and she's Jean Bell. So we go on and we explain who this person, but not the why of how they're connected to have happened to Bride in the past, which is very weird. Exactly like describing blow for blow what had happened in the past. But Bride does go on and explain that Green was to go by the name Copperhead, as well as also Bride going by the name Black Mamba, which is eventually to lead to a funny joke where Copperhead explains, man, I should have gone by Black Mamba. That would have made a lot more sense. But anyways, we make our way into the kitchen. Bride ends up asking Green for a towel, and Green starts asking, hey, would you like some cream and sugar? I'm like, you just fought to the death, and now you're asking like what kind of coffee this woman wants? Okay, like, man, you guys really put your on pause. So Green is going on and over explaining to Bride that like now is not the time for them to fight. Also, Green is to explain that 4 years has passed and Green is to be a very much different person. And the Bride is to tell Green, I don't care what you've done in 4 years. If anything, you've done something that cannot be undone. So, like, if anything, like, I'm not asking to get completely even with you. Because if I were, I would not only kill you, but I would kill your daughter and everyone you love. I'm just coming after you. Simple enough. So, Green goes eventually on to explain about this baseball field that they can go to and the things that they should wear and this and that, to make us believe that this fight is not going to continue right here and now. And so, eventually what does go on and happen here is we do eventually go on and have Green, who is to tell the Bride, like, well, hey, if you'll excuse me, I want to go on and I want to make cereal for my daughter. Cereal in the afternoon? Seems a little weird, but regardless, because you would think a girl getting out of school would probably be in the afternoon. Why is her mother making cereal in the afternoon? But I guess it is what it is. So Green goes on to get this cereal box, and all of a sudden this cereal box becomes a weapon. We come to find out that the cereal box has a gun inside of it. Green shoots the gun from out of the cereal box, And we have bride that doesn't get hit by the gun. And so the bride goes on, whips out a knife, flings it, and it hits Green in the chest, and she goes down immediately. She dies. Green falls over to the ground, and Nikki, hearing the noises of gunfire and fighting, Nikki makes her way down to figure out what is happening. The bride goes on and takes the knife, clings it, and tells Nikki, it's like, well, hey, I didn't intend to kill your mother in front of you. For that, I'm sorry. If anything, if somewhere down the road this does really bother you, then one day you can come for me. And I'll be waiting. So, the bride does go on and leave and make her way back into the pussy wagon. This goofy yellow car that eventually will come to find out how she came upon this. So, we have Bride that goes on and has this death list 5, and she crosses off a name. And now she's going to go on and make her way to O-Ren. So, now we go on to pedal back a little bit. We've come to find that we have to make our way to the bride shortly thereafter her wedding, and to have had Bill shoot her in the head, and the place getting investigated after the fact. And so we have this officer that makes his way into this church to get told about how 9 people had died, and is to surveillance the scene. We would go on to have this detective make his way to the bride's body, and takes a good look at her, and is to realize that she's still alive. The next thing we see is the bride making her way to the hospital. And we'll come to find a woman by the name of Driver also making her way to this same said hospital with this trench coat and this red umbrella and this one patch over the eye. Driver goes on to make her way into this hospital to change her outfit, because she's going to change to become this nurse. Because she's going to go on and inject the bride to kill her, because of course, no loose ends. So, as Driver makes her way to the bride's bed of this hospital, we'd come to find who Driver is. She's a member of the Deadly Viper Assassination Squad. The Deadly Viper Assassination Squad was to have been the one group that had come together to eventually wipe everyone out at this wedding. And this will eventually be a person that the bride will come after at some point. we kind of get this brief showing of this girl here, and kind of we'll see her in flashes later on, but eventually her death will not occur within this entire movie. At some point it will, but not in this film. And her code name is California Mountain Snake. So, Driver makes her way to the bride and is to put her finger over the woman's nose, noticing if she is to go on and breathe to see if she's still alive. Driver goes on to say, I might never have liked you. Point in fact, I despise you. But that shouldn't suggest that I don't respect you. You might never have, or I might, no. Dying in your sleep is a luxury of our kind rarely is afforded. But this is my gift to you. So, Driver all of a sudden, while talking to the bride, all of a sudden gets a phone call. And this is a phone call from Bill. Bill is to find out what Driver is doing and is to have her abort that whole mission because that's just not what they do. So, and if anything, there is possibly a reason why, even when Bill is to put a bullet in this woman's head, how she kept on breathing anyways. And so, eventually, Driver is to go on and leave here, and we will eventually go on to have 4 years later. For 4 years, the bride was in a coma. So, that is to, of course, be a reason why easily we had it where the driver was talking to her without the bride waking up and responding. So, the next thing we see is a bug over the bride's arm, of course, sucking the life out of her, waking her up. The bride is to remember that she had gotten a bullet to her head, so she touches her head and realizes that she has a metal plate where she had gotten shot. So that's how they explain how she survived, by getting a metal plate in her head. The bride is to also check her stomach to realize that she has also lost her womb. She is to have lost her bun in the oven. And she is to be an emotional wreck. All of a sudden, the next thing we see is two men making their way into the bride's room slowly but surely. So the bride goes on and makes her way just back to sleep, pretending she is, of course, sleeping. So we have this truck driver and a guy named Buck, who's an orderly here at this hospital, who is to seemingly take advantage of certain patients who are, I guess, in the bride's case, comatose or probably dead, anything in between. So Buck is to go on and get a payout from this driver, and so Buck is to go on and explain here, like, well, hey, $75 for you to F her, to sleep with her. And Buck goes on to explain that there are certain rules. if a nurse comes through here and the truck driver does anything to her, like, the jig is up. But then also, uh, for him to probably go on and realize that uh, this girl's specific plumbing probably doesn't work as well because she's been comatose for a while. So, if anything, this girl will eventually get dried up. So, Buck eventually tosses this guy some Vaseline, as well as also explain to him, hey, no biting, no hickeys, no nothing. Because, yeah, like, you don't want to have any kind of something that will leave a mark for other nurses or other anybody to get suspicious and accuse Buck of anything later on. So, Buck goes on and leaves and says that he'll be back in 20. And so what ends up happening is the truck driver is to make his way over the bride's body, and will come to find that the truck driver ends up getting quite injured, as the truck driver is to kiss said bride, and the bride will go on and rip off a piece of this guy's lips, and eventually will get her her gown all bloody. So the bride goes on and takes the truck driver and gets him off of her. And then the bride tries to get up out of bed, but realizes that her whole entire body has really atrophied. So she's not going to be so easily able to get any walking distance from anywhere. Here's also the problem with this movie. We would also go on to have the bride, who I feel like gets her leg function back, I think, a little bit too quickly in this film. It doesn't quite make sense to me of how quickly her body is moving, but maybe there is some explanation later on of how is it that she was to have gone on and be able to quicken her pace faster than anyone else. I guess willpower or something comes into play, but regardless. So the bride is also to have splashed some water over her to go on and kind of revive her here. So Buck is to have gone on and realized, okay, 20 minutes is up, so he makes his way back. The bride goes on and finds that the truck driver has this knife and takes it from him. Going on to wait for Buck, and when he goes on Buck and opens the door, the bride is to meet him underneath the door and is to slice open his Achilles tendon, or his ankle. So he falls. We go on to have the bride, who is to ask Buck, where's Bill? And Buck does not answer. So the bride just continues to slam this door into Buck's face, continuing to asking him, where is Bill? And Buck begs, please stop hitting me. I don't know who Bill is, so on and so forth. So eventually the bride will figure out who Buck is and realize that Buck is the guy that likes to fuck. So eventually the bride will realize that this guy is, of course, disgusting, and he deserves to probably be killed here. So she slams the door in his face so hard that I think his neck does snap, and I think he does die here. So, but I'm not exactly sure. I'm also not a doctor either. So, the bride goes on and is to put on Buck's glasses, which I thought was hilarious, and that's why the background is to be what it is, because I thought it was funny. And then the bride goes on and thumbs through Buck's person and realizes that he has keys, and the keychain ends up reading Pussy Wagon. Where after the bride is to read this, she then goes on and is to realize that all this guy cares about is getting pussy, and that's all he cares about. So again, another reason why the bride even more just swings the door to crush this guy's head. The next thing we see is that the bride had traded attire with Buck because, of course, her gown being bloody anyways. And she gets into a wheelchair and she wheelchairs her way to try to figure out where exactly Buck's pussy wagon is. Conveniently, there is a car that states the name that is to make, of course, the bride realize, okay, I guess this is obviously his car, because it has to state what it is. So, we'd have the bride struggling her way into the wagon, and she's to be grabbing on to so many pieces of this car, thrusting her body into it, and then has the door closed. We now consistently have to have the bride wanting to wiggle her big toe, consistently asking her body to start to move. Then we get a brief flashback of the assassins of who are to be responsible for her wedding's 9 murders. And to show you the faces of the ones who had gone on and done the assassinations of this group. So, naming them all the members of the Deadly Viper Assassination Squad. So, we'd go on to have the bride realize, out of all these people, that eventually O-Ren will probably go on and be the easiest one to find. And she'll end up going on and probably being the first name on her death list. But eventually she'll find Green before she'll find O-Ren. So, oddly enough, it's kind of funny how the bride goes on and says, oh yeah, she's the easy one to find, but she won't be the first. So, here's also where we go on and they mention O-Ren. They mention that she's a member of the Viper Assassination Squad, which we've already said. And then we have to explain the origin of O-Ren. We have to tell her life story, but not exactly what she did to get to us needing to know why she is to have been placed here within this film. It's true. So, they go on and state that O-Ren was born in an American military base in Tokyo, Japan. She's half Japanese, half Chinese, and an American Army brat. She had made her first acquaintance with death at age 9, and she used to go on to be the most ruthless yakuza boss, or no, and she is to have gone on and killed the most ruthless yakuza boss Matsumoto, because of the death of her parents. So, in a flashback here, which is to be animated, we'll come to find that O-Ren is to be underneath this bed. While O-Ren is underneath this bed, she is to be hearing things going on around her. Death is going around her. We'd come to find that her father is facing off against these men that are to be tied to Matsumoto. And so we go on to, I just needed to briefly check out this name because I wasn't sure what it was. We have O-Ren's father who is going on and facing off against one of these men and breaking an arm and thrusting him into a glass display of all these plates and continuing to take down further men. At one point here, we have a guy named Pretty Ricky that goes on to take a sword and cuts through the back of O-Ren's father, killing him. O-Ren's father falls in front of the bed of O-Ren, and O-Ren is tempted to say something. But then she realizes, oh, I should still be quiet here, so that I can stay alive. Pretty Ricky, after killing O-Ren's father, is to wipe his blade clean. And then we follow it up with going on and seeing Matsumoto appear to take out O-Ren's mother on top of this bed, and Matsumoto slices through the bed, so much so that O-Ren from underneath it sees the blade go through, and the blood start to trickle. So O-Ren starts to see a pattern of blood start to form upon her face, and Pretty Ricky and Matsumoto leave the room. Pretty Ricky goes on and sees a thing of alcohol and shoots it, and then goes on to see a cigarette that he flings and lights the place on fire to leave no evidence of them being there. The location, the house of which is to burn all around, but luckily, O-Ren is to leave unscathed. Some time has passed as O-Ren has devoted her life probably to revenge to try to figure out a way for Matsumoto to end up being with O-Ren. And what had transpired is it seems that Matsumoto is really into young women in a intimate-like setting, which is gross. So there seems to be some intimacy going on between the two of them in some bed, and O-Ren is to go on to take a time of having a weapon on her, a blade of sorts, to stab into Matsumoto while they're in the throes of passion. And so Matsumoto dies. Shortly thereafter that, after the blood is to be pouring out, we would come to find that the bodyguards of Matsumoto are to enter the room and have their guns drawn. O-Ren slips underneath the bed, whips out her gun, blasts the guys in the leg, taking them out, shooting and killing them. The next thing we see is that O-Ren has come to be a pretty decent assassin. O-Ren is to go on and have this sniper rifle and is to be eyeing this ambassador that is to be in one of these vehicles. O-Ren whips out her sniper to go on and blast at this car to take out this ambassador and assassinate him, and shoots him right in the forehead and kills him. Then we end up showing, kind of briefly, the bride's wedding and the brief involvement of O-Ren kicking the bride in the face. And I guess that has to be the full explanation of O-Ren, I guess, as best as we can really get here. So, now back to, of course, the bride back at the wagon, asking her body to move. Further going on and getting so much success that 13 hours later has passed. So yeah, I'm sure that Buck would have had to have been dead, because 13 hours, yeah, there's no way, like, I'm sure in 13 hours probably Buck's body had been found, but even that, like, why wouldn't they go to his car and investigate that? Like, yeah, like, if anything, I'm sure the bride may have, like, gone on to hide Buck's body really good to where he's never been seen again. So yeah, so giving her all the time in the world after killing him to hide the body, and yeah, so we have the bride that goes on to get out of the backseat of the car, moving her legs well enough to make her way to the front seat of the car so she can drive around. The next thing we see is the bride making her way to Air O to be helped. And the bride is to have a completely different set of clothing. Explain to us that quite a bit of time has passed here. So, the bride is to make her way to Okinawa and is to make her way to meet up with a guy named Hanzo. I believe, yeah, it's Hanzo. Because she needs, of course, something from him, which, of course, is to be a blade. Hanzo will go on to no longer be making weapons of destruction or death anymore. But it seems that the bride will be very convincing to have Hanzo work with her. But if anything, she'll kind of be playing up the fact of who she is. Like, they'll kind of be kind of pussyfooting around a little bit for a little while, until finally the bride will explain what she's really there for. So the bride will go on to meet with Hanzo, and the two of them will have an exchange of words. Hanzo will eventually ask the bride how much Japanese she knows, as he, of course, goes on and asks her if she speaks English, and so he can. But eventually he'll go on to be fascinated that the bride can actually speak some words of English. So, as the bride starts speaking Japanese, he realizes how she's to go on and start pronouncing these words very well. And to the point where Hanzo is to be rushing his friend, I believe, Johnny Mo or Mo, asking him to go on and get the bride some tea, because of course her being their guest. So Hanzo will consistently keep asking the bride what words that she knows, like domo and arigato. And so domo arigato means thank you very much. Of course, I only know domo arigato because, of course, I know the REO Speedwagon song Domo arigato, Mister. That's the only reason why I remember that. And that's probably the only real Japanese that I know. Like, if anything, there are some things that I might have like sipped away from while watching any Japanese shows at some point, but it's like Domo Arigato is the only thing that I've kind of consistently more slipped away from than anything else. But anyways, so it's interesting when eventually the bride is to ask for sake instead of tea, and Johnny ends up saying to the bride, "It's like, well, hey, it's the middle of the day. Isn't it kind of early for her to be drinking?" And Hanzo tells him, "Hey, like she's our guest. Like, hey, just don't discriminate her. Like, whatever she freaking wants, like, get her whatever she wants." So we have we have Johnny that goes on to uh, complain about if he were in the military right now, he'd probably be a general. He'd probably be this, and Hanzo says like, "Well, if I were in the military right now, I'd be emperor over you." So we eventually have Hanzo that ends, or we have Hanzo that goes on eventually asks the bride why she's there at Okinawa, and the bride says, "I came to see a man. You have a friend." And so he asks, Hanzo asks, like, "Well, you have a friend in Okinawa?" And the bride says, like, "Well, I've never met him." And so the bride goes on to explain what exactly his name is. And she, of course, says Hanzo. Hanzo ends up looking up and asking the bride, it's like, "Well, what do you want with him for?" And the bride says, "I need Japanese steel." She's going on and specifically asking for Japanese steel for how strong it is. And eventually, when the bride goes on and takes this Japanese steel to go up against um, Oren, we realize how stronger of a blade that she has compared to eventually the Crazy 88, where we'll find that the bride, her blade just breaks through the Crazy 88's ones, and it's really cool to see how just fragile the Crazy 88's blades are, and how easily uh, the bride just kind of takes them down. It's a really interesting sight. So the bride also explains to Hanzo, beyond stating that she needs Japanese steel, that she has vermin to kill. And Hanzo's like, "Well, you must have some pretty big rats if you really need Hanzo's steel." And the bride says, "Huge." So Hanzo and bride make their way up to this attic. We go on and realize eventually that the reason why these swords are just stored away in this attic, because Hanzo is to leave his sword making life away. That Hanzo is to retire from making weapons of death. And that he is to eventually not want to go on and sell these blades to the bride, but eventually the bride is like, well, you're not going to go on and you're not going to sell me this blade anyways. You're just going to give it to me because I'm going to go on and I'm going to face off against one of the people that you used to train and I'm going to take them out. So Hanzo does go on and agree to make a blade for the bride, but he tells her it's going to go on and it's going to take a month. So you might as well train while you're here, and I'll allow you also to sleep here and let you go on and eventually take this blade and do what you want with it. It's also interesting when Hanzo tells the bride what blade to pick and she opens it, and Hanzo goes on like, oh, well, you like samurai swords, huh? Well, I like baseball. And so he takes this baseball and he chucks it at her. And the bride just goes on and slices it in half. I'm like, ooh, nice. So there's just so much about this movie that I can go on and just pick through and just really enjoy. I just really do. So we have Hanzo that goes on also to a window. And the window is to be so foggy that he can write on it. And he writes the name of Bill. And then shortly thereafter, he leaves. We go on to have the bride who takes that window and she kind of cleans it. And then 1 month is to pass. So Hanzo and Johnny here are to go on and do a ceremony with this blade to honor it. And then goes on and gives it to, of course, the bride to hand her that, calling her the yellow-haired warrior. So now we have the showdown at House of Blue Leaves. Here's where we have O-Ren. And 1 year has passed of the massacre of El Paso, Texas. So we come to find that O-Ren is to be seemingly the leader of this clan. And so O-Ren is at this meeting with a number of these kind of generals. We also have Gogo. And regardless of her attire, that she has this kind of schoolgirl-like outfit, do not let that go on and persuade you to think that this girl is not dangerous. Because Gogo is going on and drinking a bit of alcohol, and there is a guy next to her. And Gogo ends up asking this guy if he wants to sleep with her and basically put it in her. And he, of course, says yes. So she, in turn, goes on and puts a blade inside him and twists and turns it to penetrate him. We do that because we have to go on and explain kind of the sidekicks to O-Ren here, as well as also explain O-Ren's general, who's to be wearing the kind of the Kato mask. If you guys don't know who Kato is, you guys have maybe never seen Green Hornet and know who Bruce Lee is. And that kind of sucks because you're missing something out. This guy is to be wearing a black mask and is to have very thinning hair, somewhat like me, and a little bit more thinner maybe. But yeah, it's to kind of explain away that any of these guys you're to go on and see here are to be part of the Crazy 88, and they're of O-Ren's personal army, and that's who they are. So O-Ren goes on and does this meeting with a number of men, and eventually it seems there is at one point where there is to be a boss, Tanaka. Boss Tanaka goes on and has this speech because he honestly hates O-Ren because of who she is. For how she is to go on and be half this, half that, da 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 da. And it's really not about her. It's just because where she comes from. And in turn, after O-Ren is to start to hear this from this guy, shortly thereafter, she goes on, makes her way on top of this table, goes after him, and chops off his head with a huge amount of blood that sprays everywhere. O-Ren is to go on and explain, as your leader, I encourage you from time to time to always, in a respectful manner, question my logic. If you're unconvinced, a particular plan of action I've decided is the wisest, but allow me to convince you otherwise. That right here and now, any subject you have a problem with will never be taboo. But the subject of her Chinese/American heritage as a negative is her to go on and always collect her head after spoken. Just like the here. And she holds this guy's head over her. So she says, if you want to say anything, now is the effing time. Otherwise, gentlemen, this meeting's adjourned. So the next thing we see here is the bride making her way to the airport again to make her way to Tokyo. Here's the thing here. So I don't quite get it that on a plane, we see that the bride has this blade on her. And I'm like, there is no way in hell that they would ever go on and have somebody go on an airplane with a sword. But maybe there's different rules in different places, but it just doesn't make sense to me. Having a blade just openly in a plane like that makes no sense. So we come to find that O-Ren is in this limo, and she has a number of motorcycles surrounding her. It makes the illusion that the airplane is landing and that the bride can see O-Ren like driving throughout town. Like that's what like I imagine is kind of in my peripheral or my vision of what's kind of going down here. So the bride gets off the plane, making her way through the airport, and is to get onto a motorcycle, making her way to a woman named Sophie to follow her. Sophie will come to find was also involved in the assassination with the squad, and she was very much in the background making a phone call. So we have Sophie that meets up with Gogo with a bunch of the other crazy 88 because they're going into this. I want to say it's a club or a restaurant. I'm not quite sure the locale. But if anyways, there is a band playing, and like I assume any number of things of what this location actually is. I want to say it's like a nightclub. To me, that's what kind of pops into my brain. So we have this one guy who's written off as Charlie Brown, as well as also this proprietor that is shuffling off O-Ren through this, let's just say, club, opening these doors for her, and as this band is to continue to play. We go in and see in the club, eventually, we have the bride who takes off her helmet and is to be going for a drink. As we start to see more O-Ren's people start to get drunk and start to get a little bit sloppy. A little bit of that sloppy coffee. So, at one point, the bride is to eventually make her way to O-Ren's door, and for some reason, O-Ren has a suspicion that someone is there, as she goes on and chucks a dart that is being missed by the bride. And eventually, there's to be O-Ren that sicks Gogo out to see if there was somebody. And so Gogo goes on and whips out this dagger to look around. And above her, as if almost like Spider-Man. If you guys remember the scene in the very first Spider-Man movie where Spider-Man goes on and whips off his mask, and this is around the scene where it's Thanksgiving, and Harry and Norman are going on and they're meeting up together because it's Thanksgiving, and all of a sudden they think that Peter is to be back, and so they make their way up to his room, and they realize that Peter isn't there, and they kind of look through his room and they realize, man, what a mess. And we come to find that Spider-Man is on the wall and he's kind of hanging up there. In the movie, superhero movie, they go on and make a bit of a joke about that, because if anything, the Dragonfly that kind of recreates that scene, he goes on to realize that he needs to pee. So all of a sudden there's this huge amount of spray that's going down on the ground, and it's hilarious. But if anything, back to that Spider-Man scene. So he's dangling up above the wall, and eventually Norman and everybody leave the room, and then Peter goes on like, okay, now I can go on and I can change my clothes, and then I can come back in and pretend that I had to beat off this woman with this cranberry sauce. Anyways, so the whole reason why I explain that is because we kind of have the bride here who's like recreating that, or she's way above Gogo and she's kind of above the ceiling, just hanging onto these pieces so that way she doesn't fall. Shortly thereafter, Gogo goes back into the room of which that is to be with O-Ren and the rest of the other people. We see the bride sliding back down. So the bride eventually goes on and notices, or the bride goes on and makes her way to the bathroom. And slowly but surely, Sophia is to be in there with her. We have the proprietor and Charlie Brown making their way with a bunch of beer to make their way to O-Ren. And as the bride is to wait in a bathroom stall for Sophie, eventually what goes on to happen is the Crazy 88 notice that the Charlie Brown guy is wearing an attire that looks very similar to Charlie Brown and start to make fun of him. Also, they go on and then they ask for a pepperoni pizza, and the guy's like, well, I don't exactly have that. It's like, well, hey, go and get it. So we have a call out for O-Ren to come out to meet the bride because they have unfinished business. O-Ren's people go on and open these doors and make their route to see the bride, and we'll come to find that O-Ren will meet eye to eye with the bride, and the bride will go on to realize, oh, that's O-Ren, the person I've known in the past, the person that was there when everybody in this wedding had died. Flashbacking. So the bride goes on to whip out her blade and slices Sophie's arm. Surprisingly enough, Sophie will, after all this carnage has happened, still remain alive enough for the bride to drag Sophie off, so that way she can go on and deliver a message to Bill. But anyways, so Sophie's not going to die this day. Well, not in this movie anyways. So all right. Honestly, looking at the time run on this, I'm actually doing a pretty decent amount of time for this, but I know I'll probably blow it somewhere, right? So we have O-Ren that tells Charlie Brown to beat it, and then O-Ren turns to Mickey and tells him to go on and face off, of course, against the bride. The bride goes on and cuts Mickey's sword in half, and then further goes on to lodge her blade into his chest and kill him. Immediately after that, O-Ren goes on and is to tell her group, alright, like, get her. So the rest of the group starts to surround the bride, and eventually this ends out in the onslaught of course, the bride succeeding, tearing these guys down one by one, and we even go on to have the bride take down one of these women and kind of just slice her in the chest, and like her lip starts to get a little bloody. After we go on to seemingly have the minions, the lackeys, all get chopped down, we turn then to, of course, the bride asking O-Ren here, you got any others, subordinates for me to kill? That's what's going to happen. So the next thing that comes up is we realize that Go-Go is still alive. Go-Go is like, oh, hi! Go-Go over here! So we have the bride like, oh, yeah, you're Go-Go, right? Like, oh, okay, all right, sure. And Go-Go's like, well, you're the Black Mamba, right? Yeah, we know one another now. Like, so we have the bride that goes on to tell Go-Go, it's like, well, you know what, I get your reputation, but if anything, like, I understand you're just here to just do a job, but if anything, I kind of beg you to just, like, if you value your life, like, better get to stepping, better get to leaving. And we would, of course, have Go-Go. It's like, really? That's begging to you? So Here's where things get a little stepped up a notch here. We realize how much the bride is going to really be challenged here, which is to really be interesting. So, Gogo starts going on and has this weapon that is to be of a ball and chain kind of weapon. The ball is not like this huge, heavy, like bowling ball kind of thing. Like, no, it's about like the size of like a softball. But if anything, the ball can be adjusted and has blades on it and all kinds of things. So eventually, this ball and chain like weapon ends up starting to get strong here. And we start to see that this ball, when it's projectile or when it's thrusted, it eventually even like breaks through this wood, and we're like, oh my god. All right, let's see where this goes. So Gogo goes on and takes this ball and chain and wraps it around the bride's blade and forces it out of her hand. And the blade goes flying and hits this bit of glass flooring. Eventually, this ball and chain will go on and continue to be thrusted around to the point where it leaves Bride onto the ground. And since now Bride no longer has a weapon, she grabs a table for a defensive measure. The Bride goes on and takes the table and hoists it up as a defensive mechanism, and eventually the ball goes flying through the table. Did not the Bride just see that this thing goes through wood? A table is also wood. So this thing goes flying through this table, and the Bride kind of dodges it just in time for it to go flying by her. So eventually the Bride goes on and rips one of the table legs, to where there's screws at the end of where the leg meets the table, to use this as a weapon. So eventually there's quite a bit of dodging going on here, but eventually the Bride goes on and gets further closer to Gogo. Eventually there is also at a point here where when the ball starts to have blades come from it, and the Bride ends up getting sliced into the collarbone or the shoulder, somewhere in there, like right around here. The Bride even turns to show you where she had gotten cut, pretty deep. We have a point here where the Bride eventually goes on and starts to get choked by this chain, to where we're almost thinking, like, is this gonna take her out? Is this gonna do her in? Man, are we gonna get so far now just for her to be taken down by frickin' Gogo? You kidding me? With a goofy name like that, even though her ball and chain is a pretty substantial weapon. So back to the Bride is getting choked here. So how is she gonna get out of this? So the Bride still has that table leg. She goes on, thrusts it into Gogo's foot, to where that seems to be the defense to kind of give us some time here. And then also, the Bride chucks the table leg into Gogo's neck, forcing her down here. Either her head or her neck. I'm not quite sure exactly where. Somewhere in that vicinity, that is to be of a killing blow. Gogo goes down, and her eyes are bleeding. It's freaking awesome. Gogo is now dead. The Bride can get her chain away from her neck and go for her blade. O-Ren is to go on and take out her dagger, and we're probably assuming that maybe O-Ren is to realize that she's maybe going to be defeated. Slice, maybe herself, or go on and use this dagger as a, like, I'm going to defend you with this really tiny blade. But no. We will continue to go on and find here that O-Ren has a contingency plan. O-Ren tells the bride, "Did you really think that this is the only people that I had with me?" Silly rabbit, tricks are for kids. So we come to find that there is a army making their way to go against the bride. And I mean army. Holy sh... So we have O-Ren's general, the guy that we had seen earlier, that I had mentioned had the Kato mask and thinning hair. Hey, like, he looks freaking amazing, though. He looks freaking dope with the weapons he was freaking wielding. Oh my god, he was freaking awesome. So, as everyone is to surround her now, this bride, we realize, man, this is really stacking the deck. But it seems that the bride has a really big deck. And I mean succulently big. Yes, I made a deck joke. I'm sorry. It had to happen someday. So, we really just have to have now. The way that the bride is fighting is very strategic. It's very like these wafting, like wave like turns to take people down. And like you would think that maybe also the bride would like switch up her weapons. No, she really just keeps this sword. Like I was thinking that maybe she was going to double blade it, or maybe she was going to go on and find a much more long distance weapon to change things up, but still have the blade. But no, she sticks with the blade. And I can understand that, but then also I'm just like, how is she just doing this with just a blade? Like, she would need a much more long distance range weapon to like try to keep some distance apart, so that way she would get cut less or hurt less. But regardless, we continue to see that the bride is slicing and dicing through all of these men, to where we're now having to see this in black and white, to where we're seeing less blood instead of more. So, because we're also seeing a lot of spray here. We're seeing like limbs are getting chopped off, legs are getting chopped off, because of course the bride is swinging wildly. So we're seeing a lot of just like guys are getting flung around because their limbs are falling off, and people are getting jabbed in the chest. I'm like, yeah. We also have at points where like axes are come flying at the bride and she has to dodge it, and other people are gonna get hit in the whole onslaught of it all. Axes are getting freaking put in the heads of people. It's freaking like it's getting cray cray. So the bride continues on to just murder all these people with this blade still at hand. And eventually we have the fight between both bride and general. And it takes place like on this like balcony where they're like it's like a balancing act between the two of them. And I thought that was really cool because eventually the bride goes on and just chops down the general, chops off like his limbs, and that's what kind of takes him down. And then goes on and has the bride jump down to this table and continues to fight people. She also had at one point where she had this like bamboo stick where she grabbed to go from this balcony to then back down. I think that's where she goes to this table, and she takes the bamboo stick and lets go of it, and it goes flying and it hits somebody in the head and takes them down. So back at this table, so the bride goes on and goes back down and starts continuing to just chop through more people. And O-Ren is still watching. I'm trying to make sure that I've almost covered everything because there's so much going on here. Eventually, we will get to a point to the bride going up to this room, and a number of the crazy 88 follow her up these stairs into this room, and then eventually cut through these walls to get to her. And then eventually, there's the proprietor that cuts out the light in the room to give, of course, the bride an advantage. So she starts making her way through these people, cutting through them. And this scene specifically honestly reminds me of the very first Highlander film. There's a point in the later half of the Highlander film where we have Lambert, the guy who's uh, Connor MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod. He goes on and he faces off against whoever Brown is in that movie, whoever the bad guy in that movie is. And there's a point when like it's really dark and it's very blue, and the two of them are duking it out. And eventually it'll bleed to them fighting in that Coca-Cola sign, and it's very dark and it's very like heavy swings and stuff like that. Like this scene specifically reminds me of that because I had also just recently just watched some behind the scenes stuff of Highlander recently, and kind of I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this third act. I remember the later part where the two of them are duking it out, and Brown has that huge, massive sword, and we go on and we have MacLeod, who has that very thin. So battle-wise, it's not the exact same because it's two different styles clashing. Where, like, if anything, the bride and the Crazy 88, they're having the same swords or same weaponry. So, of course, the bride makes her way through all these people, and she is just left with this one youngin who is to be wielding this sword. The bride goes on and looks at this guy holding this sword and is like, "Huh!" And so she starts going through and just breaking down his sword, little chunk by chunk, to then go on and grab this man, hoisting him over her knee, and just starts spanking him. And telling him to not F around with Yakuza and to go on home to his mother. And he goes on, and he cries and he runs off, which I thought was that was so funny. It was so good. So the bride goes on and thrusts her way through the rest of that wall that had been cut down. So again, this is to realize that there's going to be a confrontation. No, we'll cut ahead. Let me pause here for a second. Okay. I got a little sidetracked of where exactly things were. So, the bride goes on to eventually look at all the crazy 88 that are still moving around because not all of them had completely died. So, the bride calls out to anybody who is still alive of this gang, because I'm sure she didn't kill every single one of them, and tells them, hey, if you want to leave with your lives, you can, but if anything, leave your limbs here, because those are mine now. And so, after that, the bride goes on and tries to find where O-Ren is, making her way outside. There seems to be snow outside, which is kind of really interesting here, to see this kind of change of pace here. So, O-Ren is to ask the bride where she had gotten her sword from, and the bride goes on to explain. O-Ren doesn't believe that this is Hanzo's steel that had been the making of her sword. And the bride goes on and turns the blade to showcase the signia that is to have O-Ren believe that it's true. So, because O-Ren said that she had lied, and then it's like, okay, all right. So O-Ren is to state, well, I hope that you saved up enough energy to face off against me. If you haven't, uh, you might not last 5 minutes against her. So we go on to have O-Ren that takes out her blade, and the two of them start going at it. O-Ren not only goes on and uses her blade, but then also is to use her sheath as a way to kind of help her out here in the early stages of this battle. And then we do have O-Ren that just throws the sheath off to the side and then just uses the blade. O-Ren does go on and slice the bride in the back. And then in turn, as they continue fighting, we go on to have the bride who slices the scalp. Or no, wait, that's a little bit early. Slices the leg of O-Ren. So now that both O-Ren and Bride have both shared slice for slice, we get to a moment here where O-Ren is to realize the skill of the bride and is to honor her and say, hey, for ridiculing you earlier, I apologize. And the bride is to accept. To realize, hey, I really didn't know who I was going up against, but now that I know your skill set, like, hey, I am to just be like, wow, okay, all right. So the bride asks if O-Ren is ready, and Ren is like, come on. They further fight, and here is when we have the bride that is to take off the scalp of O-Ren. We see a chunk of her hair going flying into the air, falling onto the ground. And I thought it would, as first, was to go on and be O-Ren's head, but no, it's just straight up her scalp. And a blood spray into the snow. Quite an amazing visual. We then see the bride, who is to kind of put her blade off to the side, and O-Ren is to fall. O-Ren is to state before she is to fall over that really was in Hozan's and Hanzo's sword. And so she falls and dies shortly thereafter, stating that. We then have the bride that crosses off O-Ren's name. And then we find as the bride is to put back on her motorcycle helmet and her coat, making her way to this car, opening up the trunk, that Sophie is with inside of it, and she closes it to then take Sophie to a hospital for her to be taken care of. The next thing we see is Sophie in this hospital, and Bill is there talking to her. Sophie, my Sophie, please forgive my betrayal. My aching heart over what she's done to you, to my beautiful and brilliant Sophie. We come to find out that Bride had kept Sophie alive for certain reasons. For information, and uh, what was the other thing? What was the other? So, I guess to hand off to Bill, so that way, she'll stooge him, and so that way Bill will know that, uh, that the bride is coming for Bill to kind of keep him in uh, a sense of dread. But anyways, when the bride goes on and asks Sophie for information, Sophie will not give her any, and the bride says, "Is like, well, hey, uh, like if you don't, then I'll start cutting things off of you, and they will definitely be things that you will miss." Because of course, the bride is going to go on and torture Sophie to try to figure out where the rest of the gang is, so that way she can much easier track them down, hoping that Sophie will have the answers. And oh, and the second reason is so you can tell him in person uh, everything that happened here tonight. Yeah, so that was the second reason. So it took me a long stretch, but I figured out what the second reason was. And we also have Bill that goes on to ask Sophie, it's like, well, hey, why did she keep you alive? And Sophie goes on to explain why the bride had kept her alive, so that way she could go on and perform, or Sophie could say to Bill what the bride had said to her. So, and the bride goes on to say, I want him to witness the extent of my mercy by witnessing your deformed body. I want you to tell him all the information you just told me. I want him to know what I know. I want him to know. I want him to know. And all I want them all to know, they'll all be soon as dead as Oren. The next thing we see is an airplane. We have the list of death being written as the bride is to be on this plane. And then we just kind of get clips of what is to probably be following into the future. We see one of the assassins, the Viper assassins, the guy, Bud, who's to be played by Michael Madden, or Madsen, who recently passed away. Like, he is to be briefly in here, and also briefly in this film overall. So Bud's character goes on and says the woman deserves her revenge, and we deserve to die. Uh, so the last thing we see here is the bride putting out the list, and a bit of dialogue here. How did you find me? I'm the man. Is she aware her daughter is still alive? Oh! And then cut to credits. So, yeah, we'll go on to have the bride not find out that her daughter is still alive until the bride meets up with Bill in the later, and I think that like in the very last movie, the bride and Bill will confront one another and they'll talk, and eventually it'll be revealed to her that daughter is still alive. From memory, from kind of brief seeing things from Kill Bill here and there. Because I think it was Marathon somewhere on TV somewhere, but I just kind of got bits and pieces of it. I don't think I watched the whole thing. So yeah, so I do know that that comes up. But anyways, I'm going to probably get that out of here, so we can upload this. Plus, also, this is actually pretty decent amount of time compared to all the other videos that I've gone on and done. So I'm to be just victory lapping that like this video didn't take as long as normally other things. Plus, also to kind of get underneath the 2 hour thing of how long this movie actually was. Anyways, so thank you for going on and listening to this. Really, I do appreciate you going on and checking this out because it really does help out the channel. It does help me know that other people exist out there. And it's also kind of cool to eventually going on and finding out that people enjoy certain movies and shows also, or to have their certain very varied opinions about certain things. And it's kind of interesting just to kind of see any random number of people that go on and find these pieces of content, regardless of how long they've been out for. It is really interesting to see people and either view or comment section or whatever. It's always really interesting. So with that said, I'm gonna get that out of here so I can upload today, and then also I'll probably end up doing probably some workouts and stuff like that. Hopefully, I'll probably get something other than just this accomplished for today, and then I'll go on and kind of piecemeal what is eventually gonna hopefully I hope be a more consistent amount of reviews. It'll kind of depend on my day to day. But anyways, I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.